Life in the suburbs was, for the most part, exactly what I'd always wanted. A quiet street, friendly neighbors, most of them, anyway, and a manageable patch of green that I took genuine pride in maintaining. I'm not someone who thrives on drama, quite the opposite. I meticulously follow rules, pay my bills on time, and genuinely believe in the power of a well-maintained lawn to foster community spirit. Our HOA, while sometimes a bit overzealous, generally kept things running smoothly, and I appreciated the order it brought. Before Karen, whose name, ironically, was actually Deborah, life was predictable and peaceful. My evenings were spent tending my rose bushes, grilling on the patio, and enjoying the sunset with a glass of iced tea. Weekends were for leisurely bike rides and potlucks with neighbors. I even volunteered on the landscaping committee, believing in contributing to the overall aesthetic of our little suburban oasis. I valued the sense of community and the shared responsibility for maintaining our property values. Little did I know, that meticulously crafted tranquility was about to be shattered by a woman with an insatiable need to meddle and a complete disregard for personal boundaries. It all started subtly, almost innocuously, but those early, seemingly insignificant interactions were the harbingers of a suburban nightmare I never saw coming. A nightmare that would ultimately lead me to make a somewhat unconventional, but ultimately effective, decision. A decision involving a very large, very intimidating, and very well-trained Doberman. Deborah's initial offenses were minor, almost laughable in retrospect. A slightly too long lawn, according to her meticulous measurements. A misplaced garbage can on trash day. The horror. Each infraction was accompanied by a pointed glance, a barely audible tut-tut, or a saccharine sweet suggestion delivered with a thinly veiled layer of condescension. "Oh, honey," she'd coo, "are you sure those petunias are the approved shade of pink? You know how Mr. Henderson gets." At first, I brushed it off. Everyone has their quirks, right? And honestly, I sometimes did let the grass grow a little longer than strictly permitted. Life gets busy. I figured Deborah was just a stickler for the rules, and who was I to judge? I even made an effort to be extra compliant, trimming the hedges with military precision and triple-checking the garbage can placement. I wanted to be a good neighbor, and I believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But then came the notes. Little, passive-aggressive missives slipped into my mailbox, typed in a sterile font and signed simply, "A concerned neighbor." They detailed every perceived imperfection in my yard, from the rogue dandelion to the slightly faded paint on my mailbox post. It was annoying, yes, but still within the realm of tolerable. I chuckled about it with my partner, Sarah, and we even started a Karen compliment jar, where we'd deposit $1 every time we received a new note. We thought it was a funny way to cope, a way to turn her negativity into something positive. We were so naive. The notes and the pointed glances were one thing, irritating but ultimately harmless. What crossed the line, what truly began to unsettle me, was the first time I saw her in my yard. I was watering my tomato plants one Saturday morning when I noticed her out of the corner of my eye. She was standing near my prized rose bushes, poking at the soil with her gardening gloves. "Deborah?" I asked, a note of surprise in my voice. "Is everything all right?" She startled, as if caught doing something she shouldn't. "Oh, hello dear," she chirped, a little too brightly. "I was just admiring your roses. They seem to be developing a bit of black spot. I was just checking to see if you've been using the proper fungicide." I felt a surge of annoyance. "They're fine, Deborah," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "I'm handling it." "Are you sure?" she persisted, stepping closer. "Black spot can spread so quickly. It's really quite detrimental to the whole neighborhood when roses aren't properly maintained." "I appreciate your concern," I said, a little more firmly this time, "but I've got it under control. And, frankly, I'd prefer it if you didn't come into my yard without asking." She gave me a wounded look. "Oh, I'm so sorry, dear. I just wanted to help." And with that, she turned and walked back to her own property, leaving me standing there, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. This was a new level of intrusive, and I had a feeling it wasn't going to be the last. Of course, it wasn't the last. The rose incident was merely the opening act in Deborah's ongoing performance of Concerned Neighbor Gone Wild. The frequency of her intrusions increased, and the reasons became increasingly absurd. One afternoon, I came home from work to find her meticulously straightening the solar lights that lined my walkway. "They were a little crooked, dear," she explained, as if this justified her presence on my property. "I just wanted to make sure they were casting the light evenly." Another time, she was inspecting my mailbox. "I noticed a small crack," she announced, tapping it with her finger. "It's really quite unsightly. You should probably replace it before the HOA notices." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that she was the HOA, or at least, she seemed to think she was. The most egregious incident involved my herb garden. I had painstakingly cultivated a thriving collection of basil, mint, and rosemary. One morning, I discovered Deborah kneeling amongst the plants, snipping off sprigs with her garden shears. "I'm making a potpourri," she explained brightly. "And your herbs smelled *divine star." I was livid. This wasn't just meddling, it was outright theft. I told her, in no uncertain terms, to get off my property and to never, ever touch my plants again. Her response? A saccharine smile and a breezy, "Don't be silly, dear. I was doing you a favor." That was the moment I knew that polite requests and subtle hints were never going to work with Deborah. Something more drastic was required. I wasn't about to resort to yelling matches or petty vandalism, though the thought of accidentally misplacing her garden gnomes did cross my mind. Instead, I tried the adult approach. First, I attempted a calm, rational conversation. I invited Deborah over for coffee, hoping to appeal to her sense of reason. I explained, as patiently as I could, that her actions were making me uncomfortable and that I valued my privacy. She listened with a polite smile, nodding occasionally, but I could tell it wasn't sinking in. She simply couldn't grasp the concept that her helpfulness was unwanted. Next, I wrote a formal letter to the HOA, detailing Deborah's repeated trespassing and requesting their intervention. I included dates, times, and specific examples of her behavior. I even cited the relevant HOA bylaws regarding property boundaries and harassment. The HOA's response was a form letter stating that they were aware of the situation and would take appropriate action. Weeks turned into months, and nothing changed. Deborah continued her intrusions, emboldened by the HOA's inaction. Finally, I even tried appealing to her husband, Harold, a quiet, unassuming man who always seemed slightly bewildered by Deborah's antics. I caught him mowing his lawn one afternoon and politely explained the situation. He listened with a sympathetic expression and promised to talk to her. But whatever he said clearly had no effect. Deborah's behavior remained unchanged. I was starting to feel desperate. I had exhausted all reasonable avenues, and I was still being subjected to her relentless meddling. The feeling of helplessness was suffocating. It wasn't just the annoyance of her meddling, it was the violation of my privacy, the constant feeling of being watched and judged. I started avoiding my own yard, dreading the possibility of another encounter with Deborah. My rose bushes, once a source of joy, now felt like targets, beacons drawing her in. The herb garden, once a vibrant and fragrant oasis, became a reminder of her brazen theft. Sleep became difficult. I'd lie awake at night, replaying our interactions in my head, wondering what I could have done differently. I started having anxiety dreams about Deborah, dreams where she was dismantling my house brick by brick, replacing it with perfectly manicured, HOA-approved shrubbery. Sarah noticed the change in me. I was withdrawn, irritable, and constantly on edge. She tried to reassure me, suggesting we move, but I refused. Why should I be forced to leave my home because of one overbearing neighbor? This was my yard, my sanctuary, and I wasn't going to let Deborah drive me out. But something had to change. I couldn't continue living in a state of constant anxiety and resentment. I needed to reclaim my space, to restore my sense of peace and security. I considered installing security cameras, but that felt too passive, too much like admitting defeat. I thought about building a tall fence, but that would be an eyesore and would only further isolate me from the rest of the neighborhood. I needed something more impactful. Something that would send a clear and unmistakable message: stay off my property. The idea sparked during one particularly sleepless night. I was tossing and turning, replaying the herb garden incident in my head, when it hit me: a dog. Not just any dog, mind you. A dog with presence. A dog with a reputation. A dog that would make Deborah think twice before setting foot on my property again. Initially, I hesitated. I'd never owned a dog before. It was a big responsibility, a commitment of time, energy, and money. And frankly, the thought of dealing with dog hair and muddy paw prints wasn't exactly appealing. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. A dog would not only deter Deborah, but it would also provide a sense of security and companionship that I desperately needed. The breed was the crucial question. A Chihuahua, while undeniably cute, wouldn't exactly strike fear into the heart of an HOA Karen. A golden retriever might be too friendly, too likely to lick Deborah into submission. I needed something imposing, something that radiated confidence and protectiveness. That's when I landed on the Doberman. Sleek, intelligent, and undeniably intimidating, the Doberman possessed all the qualities I was looking for. They were loyal and protective of their families, but also highly trainable and eager to please. I knew that owning a Doberman would come with its own set of challenges, but I was willing to put in the work. I would research reputable breeders, enroll in obedience classes, and ensure that the dog was properly socialized. This wasn't just about scaring Deborah, It was about becoming a responsible and loving dog owner. This was about reclaiming my life. The search for the perfect Doberman was an adventure in itself. I spent weeks researching breeders, poring over pedigrees, and interviewing countless individuals. I wasn't just looking for a dog with the right physical characteristics, I was looking for a dog with the right temperament. I needed a dog that was confident but not aggressive, intelligent but not overly independent, and above all, a dog that would bond strongly with me and Sarah. I finally found him at a small, family-run kennel in the countryside. His name was Kaiser, and he was everything I'd hoped for and more. He was a sleek, muscular specimen with intelligent, soulful eyes and a playful, inquisitive nature. From the moment I met him, I knew he was the one. Bringing Kaiser home was both exciting and nerve-wracking. I'd spent weeks preparing the house, buying all the necessary supplies, a comfortable bed, sturdy toys, and a seemingly endless supply of chew bones. But I was still worried. Would he adjust to his new surroundings? Would he get along with Sarah? And most importantly, would he live up to my expectations as a deterrent for Deborah? The first few days were a whirlwind of housebreaking, crate training, and socialization. Kaiser was a quick learner, and he quickly adapted to his new routine. He bonded with Sarah instantly, showering her with affection and playful nips. And as for Deborah, well, she hadn't ventured anywhere near my property since Kaiser's arrival. It seemed my plan was already working. The inevitable confrontation arrived sooner than I expected. I was in the garden, weeding the petunias, the HOA-approved shade of pink, naturally, with Kaiser lounging nearby. He was still a puppy, barely 6 months old, but he already possessed an impressive physique and an even more impressive bark. I saw Deborah approaching from the corner of my eye. She paused at the edge of my property, her eyes widening as she took in Kaiser's imposing figure. He, in turn, stood up, his ears perked, and let out a low, rumbling growl. It wasn't an aggressive growl, but it was definitely a warning. "Oh," Deborah said, her voice a little shaky. You got a dog?" "Yes, Deborah," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "This is Kaiser." She took a tentative step forward, then stopped again as Kaiser's growl intensified. He's very big," she stammered. "He is," I agreed. "And he's very protective of his family and his property." I didn't need to say anything else. The message was clear. Deborah stood there for a moment, her face a mask of conflicting emotions, fear, annoyance, and perhaps a hint of grudging respect. Then, without a word, she turned and walked back to her own yard. Kaiser watched her go, his eyes following her every move. That was the first and last time Deborah attempted to trespass on my property after Kaiser's arrival. The Doberman effect was real, and it was glorious. The peace that Kaiser brought was immeasurable. I could finally relax in my own yard, knowing that I had a loyal protector by my side. The anxiety that had plagued me for months began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of calm and security. I started sleeping better, the anxiety dreams replaced by visions of Kaiser chasing squirrels and playing fetch in the park. But the benefits of owning Kaiser extended far beyond just deterring Deborah. He became my constant companion, joining me on walks, accompanying me to the hardware store, and even snuggling up with me on the couch while I watched TV. He brought a sense of joy and laughter back into my life that I hadn't realized was missing. Sarah, who had initially been skeptical about getting a dog, quickly fell in love with Kaiser. She became his biggest fan, showering him with affection and taking him on long hikes in the woods. He, in turn, adored her, following her around the house like a furry shadow and greeting her with enthusiastic tail wags every time she walked through the door. Owning Kaiser also connected me with a whole new community of dog lovers. I started visiting the local dog park, where I met other Doberman owners and shared stories and tips about training and care. I even joined a local dog walking group, where I made new friends and explored hidden trails in the surrounding countryside. Kaiser had not only chased away the Karen, but he had also enriched my life in ways I never could have imagined. The HOA, however, wasn't quite as thrilled with my new addition. A few weeks after Kaiser's arrival, I received another letter, this time not a passive-aggressive note, but an official communication from the HOA board. It cited a vaguely worded clause in the bylaws regarding potentially dangerous breeds and requested that I remove Kaiser from the premises immediately. I was furious. I had done my research, and Dobermans were not explicitly banned by the HOA. Besides, Kaiser was a well-trained, well-socialized dog who posed no threat to anyone. I wasn't about to back down. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes, and she assured me that I had a strong case. We drafted a response to the HOA, arguing that Kaiser was not a dangerous breed, that he was properly trained and supervised, and that the HOA's request was discriminatory and unreasonable. The HOA, perhaps realizing that they were on shaky legal ground, eventually relented. They amended their bylaws to allow Dobermans, provided that they met certain training and insurance requirements. I happily complied, enrolling Kaiser in advanced obedience classes and obtaining the necessary liability insurance. The whole experience was stressful and time-consuming, but it ultimately reinforced my resolve. I wasn't going to let the HOA, or anyone else, dictate how I lived my life. I had found a solution that worked for me, and I was prepared to fight for it. As for Deborah, she remained a fixture in the neighborhood, but her interactions with me were limited to a polite nod from across the street. I occasionally saw her tending her garden, her eyes darting nervously in my direction, but she never again ventured onto my property. It was as if an invisible force field, powered by Kaiser's watchful presence, kept her at bay. In a strange twist of fate, Kaiser's arrival seemed to have a positive effect on the entire neighborhood. People were more friendly, more willing to engage in conversation. Perhaps they were intimidated by Kaiser's size, or perhaps they simply appreciated the added sense of security he provided. Whatever the reason, the atmosphere on our street had noticeably improved. Even Harold, Deborah's long-suffering husband, seemed to be more at ease. He would often stop to chat with me while I was walking Kaiser, sharing stories about his own experiences with Deborah's HOA zealotry. He even confided in me that he secretly admired my audacity in getting a Doberman. One day, Harold approached me with a sheepish grin. "Deborah's thinking about getting a cat," he said. "Maybe that will give her something else to focus on." I couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that even Deborah was finally ready to move on from her obsession with my yard. There wasn't a dramatic final showdown, no tearful apologies, no grand reconciliation. Just a quiet understanding that boundaries had been established and would be respected. Deborah never explicitly apologized for her behavior, but her absence from my yard spoke volumes. The Karen compliment jar, once overflowing with dollar bills, became a dusty relic of a bygone era. We eventually donated the money to a local animal shelter, a fitting tribute to the dog who had inadvertently saved our sanity. Life in the suburbs settled back into a comfortable rhythm. I spent my evenings tending my roses, grilling on the patio, and enjoying the sunset with a glass of iced tea, Kaiser always by my side. Weekends were for leisurely bike rides and dog park adventures. The anxiety and resentment that had consumed me for so long faded away, replaced by a sense of peace and contentment. Looking back, I realized that the Doberman wasn't just a deterrent, he was a catalyst for change. He forced me to confront my own passivity, to stand up for myself, and to reclaim my space. He taught me the importance of setting boundaries and the power of unconventional solutions. And most importantly, he showed me that even the most challenging situations can have unexpected and positive outcomes. And Kaiser? He continued to be the best dog I could have ever asked for. He never actually bit anyone, of course. He was far too well trained for that. But his mere presence was enough to command respect and maintain the peace. He became a beloved member of the community, known for his gentle nature with children and his unwavering loyalty to his family. I often wondered what Deborah thought about it all. Did she regret her behavior? Did she secretly admire my audacity, as Harold had suggested? I'll probably never know. But I did notice one small, almost imperceptible change in her demeanor. She started taking more pride in her own yard. She planted colorful flower beds, trimmed her hedges with meticulous care, and even installed a small bird feeder. It was as if she was finally channeling her obsessive tendencies into something positive and constructive. Perhaps, in a strange and roundabout way, Kaiser had helped her too. Perhaps he had taught her the importance of respecting boundaries and the value of finding healthy outlets for her energy. Or perhaps she was just afraid of getting bitten. Whatever the reason, I'm grateful for the peace and tranquility that he brought back into my life. And I'm eternally grateful for the lessons I learned along the way. Sometimes, the best solutions are the most unexpected ones. And sometimes, all it takes is a Doberman to scare off a Karen. So, the moral of the story? Sometimes, the most effective solution is also the most unexpected. Who knew that a Doberman could be the key to suburban harmony? And while I initially got Kaiser to solve a very specific problem, he ended up enriching my life in countless ways. He taught me the meaning of unconditional love, the importance of living in the moment, and the simple joy of a wagging tail. He also taught me a thing or two about standing up for myself. Before Kaiser, I was a people pleaser, always eager to avoid conflict and maintain the peace, even at the expense of my own well-being. But Deborah's relentless intrusions forced me to confront my own passivity and to assert my boundaries. And while I initially hesitated to take such a drastic step as getting a Doberman, I'm now grateful that I did. It taught me that sometimes, you have to fight for what you believe in, even if it means ruffling a few feathers along the way. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is that even Karens are capable of change. While I'll never be best friends with Deborah, I'm glad that she seems to have found a more constructive way to channel her energy. And who knows, maybe one day she'll even muster up the courage to pet Kaiser. But until then, I'm content to enjoy my peaceful suburban life, knowing that I have a loyal protector by my side. These days, life is good. The roses are thriving, the herb garden is overflowing, and the solar lights are perfectly aligned, though I still check them myself, just in case. And every time I see Deborah across the street, meticulously pruning her petunias, I can't help but smile. She still gives Kaiser a wide berth, of course. I suspect she's convinced he's secretly plotting his revenge for the herb-snatching incident. But that's okay. I don't need her approval or her friendship. I have Kaiser, Sarah, and a newfound sense of confidence. And that's more than enough. So, if you ever find yourself dealing with an HOA Karen who just won't respect your boundaries, take my advice, consider getting a Doberman. It might just be the best decision you ever make. Just be prepared for the unexpected side effects, the unconditional love, the endless walks, and the surprisingly strong urge to buy a ridiculously oversized dog bed. And if you happen to live in my neighborhood, feel free to stop by and say hello. Just be sure to bring a treat for Kaiser. He's always happy to make new friends, as long as they stay on the right side of the property line. The Doberman effect, you see, is a powerful thing. And sometimes, a little bit of intimidation is all it takes to bring peace to the suburbs.